Hi, I'm Kristen, and this is part one of my series on being a member of the modern Spiritualist Church. So back in 2008 is when I first attended a Spiritualist church. It was for an Easter service. And up to that point, I had never really heard of the Spiritualist church being a church that existed in the modern age. I had always thought that it had kind of died out in the 1920s with the Spiritualist movement. So before I found out that the church was still in existence, I had a lot of paranormal experiences as a child. I had seen objects moving on their own. I had seen objects turning on and um, being able to operate without being plugged in, without any batteries. And there was just a lot going on in my home life that kind of told me that ghosts are real and spirits are real. And I always wanted to know more about it. So when I was a child, when I was a teenager and going through college, I was always reading books about spirits and the spirit world and near-death experiences, what it's like in the afterlife, what it's like to go to heaven, what just in general, what it's like on the other side. Before I found the Spiritualist Church, I did learn about Allan Kardec and the Spirits book, and so I read that from cover to cover, and I absolutely loved it. I thought it gave a lot of answers about what happens when we die. But at a certain point, I was just thinking, like, I don't want to just keep reading about all of this. I want to be personally involved in kind of getting messages from spirit or giving messages to spirit or from spirit, excuse me. And so I knew once I found out that the Spiritualist Church still existed, that they were involved in mediumship and mediumship classes. And so I decided to attend. So that first service that I went to, as I mentioned, it was Easter, and the particular church in New England where I live that I attended, it was a kind of hybrid Christian spiritualist church, and I don't believe too many of those even exist anymore, if any exist. But at the time, there were a lot of parishioners that were Christian, but also believed in the continuation of the soul, and also kind of like there was some blurring of the lines between whether people believed in reincarnation or not. Obviously, there'd be some spirit messages coming through about past lives or lives people had led. So it really depended on the person if they believed in reincarnation or not. Um, but I had gone on this Easter Sunday, and there was a full traditional Christian Easter service. So there was nothing that really stuck out in my mind as being too strange about the service itself. There were hymns, there was a traditional sermon that was about Jesus and his resurrection. And then I can't remember the guest minister giving any messages from Spirit at the end, but she gave out like these tiny little kind of iridescent beads. And so there were only probably 30 to 40 of us that were in the congregation at that time and were there that day. They passed around a bowl, and every single person took a bead, and the guest minister said, this bead is meant to represent like the divine glowing spirit that's within all of us, and like kind of just keep this close to you so that you know that when you die, like this still exists, this still is going to be kind of in the world, in the universe outside of your body after you die. um, and I just thought that that was really beautiful, really pretty, and it kind of got me interested in coming back to the church and seeing what an actual like traditional Sunday service would be when it wasn't a holiday. Um, and so that's when I started going. It was probably a few weeks later, maybe a month later, that I started going to the church services. And so right here with me, I have a pamphlet from my church that I used to attend. And so as you can see, it has the cross down the center, and it has the traditional sunflower logo that's used within the Spiritualist church organization. And then I also have like this like little sunflower pin that I received as a member of the church, and then I ended up becoming a board member of the church. So to get into an introduction of spiritualism in the modern age, I guess I will go through kind of what happens in a traditional Sunday church service and their principles that they kind of live by. If you become a member of the church, you abide by these principles, and then go into kind of my first regular spirit communication that I received while I was still checking it out before I became a member. Okay. So the order of service, I have it right here, and I'll just read that off. So when you enter the church, there is a musical prelude, and somebody is typically playing a piano in the corner of the room. Then there is a welcome statement, an opening hymn, and an invocation. And then at that point, there are the declaration of principles of the church that are read out, and they are all said in unison by everybody that is in the room, in the congregation that day. That's then followed by a healing hymn, a healing prayer, And then there's laying on of hands healing. And so you'll see people going up to the front of the church during that time. And again, there'll be a pianist or some type of musician at the front. And while they play music, anybody who needs healing can just come up and sit in one of the, like, typically there's either 2 or 3 empty chairs in the front, and there will be healers that put kind of hands like on the top of the head and on the shoulders and heal the people that come to sit. And they'll rotate out through that portion of the service that is about laying on of hands healing. And once that's over, then the minister or the guest minister delivers a sermon. There's then a hymn, spirit greetings, which is the traditional mediumship portion of the service right before the end. And then there are announcements and doxology of Let There Be Peace on Earth. So during the doxology, everybody in the entire room gets up, they hold hands in this big circle going around the room, and they sing that song. Then at the end, there is a benediction and musical postlude. And kind of, again, the pianist will play everybody out, and so they can go to like coffee time and go socialize afterwards. So as I mentioned, part of the beginning of the Sunday service is this declaration of principles. So I have that right here. So for anybody who is not familiar with the Spiritualist Church, kind of doesn't know how they actually are structured as an organization, the specific beliefs that they have beyond just we continue after death, I'll quickly read those off here. So the Declaration of Principles. 1, we believe in infinite intelligence. 2, we believe that the phenomena of nature, both physical and spiritual, are the expression of infinite intelligence. 3, we affirm that a correct understanding of such expression and living in accordance therewith constitutes true religion. 4, we affirm that the existence and personal identity of the individual continue after the change called death. 5, we affirm that communication with the so-called dead is a fact, scientifically proven by the phenomena of spiritualism. 6, we believe that the highest morality is contained in the Golden Rule. Whatsoever ye would that others should do unto you, do ye also unto them. 7, we affirm that the moral responsibility of the individual, and that he makes his own happiness or unhappiness as he obeys or disobeys nature's physical and spiritual laws. 8, we affirm that the doorway to reformation is never closed against any human soul here or hereafter. 9, we affirm that the precept of prophecy contained in the Bible is a divine attribute proven through mediumship. So yeah, at the beginning of the Sunday service every single week, you would hear every single person in the room joining together to say all of these principles all collectively at the same time. And so I'm not going to lie, when I first started going, it seemed a little bit eerie. I had never been a member of a church before. I had never traditionally gone to church services, so I don't know if this is something that was commonly happening. I do recall watching church services from Christian churches where everybody kind of repeats the same line in the Bible. But this was a lot of rules and a lot of principles that people were kind of repeating, and it was very overwhelming, but it was also really beautiful to hear all of these people saying that we believe in the Golden Rule and we believe that we don't die, and just how nice it was to kind of hear it from that kind of positive perspective. And so the first real sermon that I went to that was not a holiday sermon, I can't recall who the minister was. I can't remember what the spirit messages were, but I want to say a handful of times after I had started going to this church, I did receive a message myself during the greetings from Spirit at the end of the service. And so at this time, there was a new minister, and he was up at the pulpit, and he said there was an older woman coming through, and he was able to say, well, this woman's coming through for somebody on this side of the room, and then from this area of this side of the room. And so it was like in the little area where I was sitting in. He said, like, yeah, this woman is dressed with like a long skirt, and she has like really short white hair and glasses. And one of the first things that he pointed out was that she had like digestion issues. Like she seemed to be like burping a bit, and it was like he didn't want to try to make it seem gross. It was just like something that was an attribute of this person that was coming through. And he said that she had memory problems, but before she had memory issues, she really liked to read. And so I kind of raised my hand and I said, well, that sounds like me. And my grandmother, she did have Alzheimer's before she died, so memory problems right there. And before she died, she also had a really bad problem with digestion and being able to eat anything. And so, yeah, I want to say in like probably the 2 years before she passed away, she was like kind of holding her stomach and she was burping a lot, and eventually had to be put on an all liquid diet before she passed away. And so, when I identified that it was my relative that was coming through, the minister was telling me, it's like, oh, well, her message for you is that she sees that you're going to get married and she's happy for you. At that time, I wasn't engaged. I had no plans to be married or anything like that. But I believe it was probably about a year and a half after I received that message that I did end up getting married. So that was nice that she kind of was able to see a bit into the future, or saw my future plans, whatever would be happening to me, and was able to kind of be happy for me. Um, and so that was really the moment that kicked off me getting more involved in the church. And so I would go and I would hang out with people afterwards in the basement during coffee hour, and I would just have chats with people that were part of the church, and everybody was so nice. There's so many people that I think back fondly on that I used to go to church with, and I got more and more involved, and so I started talking to more people, going to the Saturday events. I started going to mediumship classes. I started taking physical mediumship classes. I eventually became a member of the board of directors of the church. Then I eventually ended up leaving. So I thought that I would kind of start digging into this a little bit for people who might be interested in the church and what goes on there, and like what on earth is going on in a religion of people who believe that we are talking to the dead, and it's a major point of why we should believe in God. But yeah, in the future, I will go into more of like what was going on in the mediumship classes and how we did some of those exercises and what was happening in the physical mediumship classes. And that ended up being like really crazy and the things that I was seeing during my time in that. Um, so yeah, please stick around if you're interested in this at all, and I will catch you up in the future on kind of other things that were happening within spiritualism. So thanks so much for being here today, and I'll see you later. Bye bye.